the technical difficulties, we have been moved from about 3 different locations to try to find the perfect spot for this. But you know, where better to talk about church and politics than in a sanctuary?
Yes.
And tonight we are joined by Pastor Alan King from the River of Life Church in Valdez. He has some great insights for us tonight. And of course, I'm Heather.
I'm Gina.
And it's great to have you all here tonight. So let's get started.
Yes, and first I got to tell you thank you, and thank you guys for being so patient with us. We have been trying, but we want to bring you the best that we possibly can. But Heather is going to be keeping up with all of your guys' questions, so make sure to put them in the chat. We're going to try to get to as many as possible. But the first thing that I wanted to bring up, Pastor, is how God instituted authority in government. And I want to go back to the Old Testament and get a look at where authority, man's authority or governance even came from.
You go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Mm-hmm. God established order. He established authority. Of course, this isn't a popular message, but he did establish Adam as the head of the house. And then as the generations passed by, you still had men like Abraham. Abraham was in a leadership position. Everybody didn't always agree with everything he did, but he held that position. And then as the generations passed, then God established judges. And the job of the judge was to make sure that the people were staying in line with the principles of God, what God had established in his law. Moses received the law, the Mosaic law. And the judges said, this is what the law says, so this is what we follow. When Israel decided we don't want judges anymore, we want a king, the judges still worked with the kings to make sure that the people were still following. Samuel, for instance, kept Saul accountable.
Right.
And and when Saul would do something wrong, Samuel didn't say, "Oh, you're the king, so I can't say anything against what you're doing."
Right.
Samuel went in and said, "How dare you do this?" And so there's a long history of established authority, but at the same time, it all went back to this is what God says. This is what God established, and we're to live our lives according to his law.
Right.
And we are a nation founded on Judeo-Christian principles.
Right.
And so, there's a long history of kings and advisors that would say to them, you got to toe the line. You've got to stay moral.
Right, and we saw what happened to Israel every time. There was constant ups and downs with kings and rulers every time that they went against God's way.
Yeah.
Every time.
And thankfully, not always, but almost every time when they would stray, you would have somebody that would come along, like a Josiah,
right,
who came along and said, we can't keep doing what we're doing.
Right.
It's not right. So there's a big word that is so important. Biblical times we saw it, and we see it now. It's accountability. And accountability is such an important thing. Somebody's got to hold people accountable.
right,
And we don't like that in our world anymore.
right.
But it's still true.
Oh, it's very true. And that's where I feel, and I know a lot of other people feel, that was a reason, for over the last 10 months, 11 months or so with the pandemic going on, a big reason we should not forsake the gathering, and why Christians needed to stand up for their values and for the church, because when we forsake that gathering with like-minded believers, we're losing accountability.
Right.
And I don't want to get off track, but yeah, so we had Josiah. He came in, and we're just going to say he shook things up a little bit. He tore down some Asherah poles, and he was trying to put God's will back where it needed to be, and God's rule back into place. And you had touched on Judeo-Christian values. And so this country back in, I believe it was 1620, the Mayflower came over, and that was based on Christian values.
Right.
Christian values, 100%. And it went from there. 100 years later, our founding, again, was a bunch of Christian men. I think the least Christian of all of them was Ben Franklin. But, everybody else, everything that they said, their values, their morals, all stem from the authority given by God. Even the school books that were being taught up until the early 1900s, it was going over Scripture. God was in our lives, every part of it, right? And somewhere we've stepped out of that. So, where do you think, how far back can you trace it? Did the church step out of our right place?
I know in my life it's changed a lot, and I'm not that old. I'm not going to tell him how old I am, but do have a birthday next week. You remember that, right? But in my lifetime, I never imagined we would get to the point that we are now.
Right.
Nobody blushes anymore, for one thing. It's like, you mentioned the Mayflower, the Mayflower Compact, which was the first codified written rules.
Right.
And God was all in it. Everything that they did, it was God. It was all about Christian principles that were involved in that. During the American Revolution, in fact, somebody said one time the American Revolution was fueled by preaching.
Right.
The preachers would preach, this isn't right.
Right.
And the people acted on it.
Right.
Even Peter Muhlenberg, who was a pastor that was in the pulpit, preached about it's time for war. Of course, you have to be careful saying stuff like
Right.
that now.
We're not
No,
impeaching
no,
you.
no,
Not impeaching
right.
you on the pulpit. We're just going to say that right
But
now.
he literally took off his clerical robe
Right.
and had an officer's uniform under it, and he said, we've got to fight this. We've got to come against what's happening.
Right.
And thank God they did. But there were Christians in the American Revolution who
Yeah.
said, let's just bow to the crown. Let's just be calm. Let's be peaceful.
Right.
Let's not stand up to them. Can you imagine what would have happened if those people had won?
We wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be here today. And, that's where so often I think we forget as a nation and as a society what brought us to America.
Yeah.
Why are we here? And it wasn't because some people just happened to set sail and, ran into a place and they stayed, but they were escaping persecution and they wanted a place to be free with their faith and their views, and they were escaping a lot, and people don't realize that, and that's quite disheartening, and we've taken there was so much church in the government, and now that's just been completely stripped, where we were talking earlier about the Danbury Convention, or Danbury Baptist Church Convention, and separation of church and state, and that was meant to protect the church from the state invading and not vice versa, and we've just come so far. And like you said, if people stepped back and if they cowered down then, it's what we're doing now.
Even worse now, because then it was, we want our own independence. We
Right.
want to be free from English rule.
Right.
Now, and I hear people all the time say, you can't mix faith and politics.
Right.
Hogwash.
Exactly.
I'm a pastor, but I'm a taxpayer.
Right.
Why do I not have the right to speak up and say,
Right.
I do not want my tax dollars? And I'm not rebelling against the government. I'm not rebelling against individuals.
Right.
But there are some moral issues. If I was that rebellious, I ride a motorcycle. I wouldn't wear a helmet. I wear a helmet because it's a rule, and it's a good rule.
Right.
As a taxpayer and as a Christian, I have some issues that I have very strong stances on. You will not find, and I've said this to my congregation, you will never find anybody that's more pro-life than I am. I do not want my tax dollars, my money, going to pay for abortion.
Right.
Because I am very pro-life.
Right.
So I think I have a right to speak up and say, because, last I heard, it was we the people.
Right.
And the Senate and the Congress are not our leaders.
Right.
They are our representatives.
Exactly.
They represent what I believe.
Right.
I believe in the sanctity of life. I don't want, and we were this close, y'all. We were that close. Here's the thing that bothers me so much about this election. We were that close. We had the Supreme Court justices in place. We had a president that was sympathetic to our cause. All we needed was 4 more years with that president and somebody to challenge that law.
Right.
And Roe v. Wade would have been overturned. And abortion would have been illegal in the United States. And God would have been so happy.
Right. And I can't somehow think that God's still going to be working through this. And I don't know how, but I can also see that there would have to be discontentment, because I look towards abortion, and we've talked before, but this is child sacrifice. And could you imagine if Christ walked in and said, wow, this is Baal all over again. Look at all of the sexual immorality everywhere, and that's heterosexual, homosexual, but that's Moloch again.
Yeah.
This here we are again, and we as Christians somehow think, that Jesus would have been okay with this. And we get the whole a sin is a sin, and
it's all basically going back to our comfort, our convenience, whether it's, as you say, we're sacrificing our kids on the altar of convenience. And that's what's happening. We're saying it's not worth the fight. We're going to sit back. We don't want to rock the boat too much. So to keep things quite convenient, whether it's abortion being convenience, where we're sacrificing our children on the, altar of Moloch, saying, here's our children, let's sacrifice those. Or if it's just, we're sitting back and just and watching and just like, oh, somebody else will clean up that mess.
Right. And we don't have time for that.
No.
And that's where if people hadn't if the pilgrims hadn't have came over, we wouldn't have the liberties that we have right now. And that's the sad thing, is a lot of people don't realize that it's usually once all of your freedoms are stripped, that's when you see the biggest movements of God. Yeah. And maybe that's the point we're coming to now, because that's where you see the biggest influx in church growth is in Iran. They're being persecuted. Behind that is China. They have no freedoms left. And that's the thing now, where they are sitting there and they're enrolling in school, the Chinese schools, and now they have to, say what their religious beliefs are before they can be enrolled in these schools. And those are things where if we keep our mouth shut, that's going to be us. And everybody's always, oh, that could never happen. That could never happen.
It is happening.
Well, but we didn't did we believe, a year ago that a pandemic was going to shut us down? Did we possibly believe that Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, that couldn't even win, in the primaries over in California, she couldn't even get people of her own state? Would anybody have expected that? Would we have expected a bombing in Nashville at the AT&T Center? I mean, you don't expect the stuff until it happens, and until we step up. But what is it that paralyzes so many Christians from stepping up and getting into the ring? Is there certain things that maybe they look to biblically, that they're like, oh, this says this or this says that, or things taken out of context?
I think that's a lot of it. And we have a hard time in the church finding balance. We're one way or another. We're either love, or judgment. There is a balance. And even with the pro-life thing, we've got to remember, we're not against the young lady.
Right.
No.
We love her.
Right.
We want to be with her, whether she's already had an abortion.
Right.
We still love her.
Right.
We need to be there to love on her and let her know we're not casting you aside.
Right.
We love you. But we've lost the balance to where it's almost like we hate the sinner and the sin.
Right.
And we got to do better.
Right.
But we do have things that we take out of context, like, for instance, in what we've done, because we want to be so loving, we have made the mistake of completely isolating ourselves from the realm of politics and leaving the fate of a future generation to immoral people.
Correct.
Because we won't speak up. because everybody leans back on Romans chapter 13. Can I read that?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Is everything still working?
I believe so.
Okay.
We're believing that it is.
Okay. Romans chapter 13. This is because I hear this as a pastor all the time. We got Romans 13. Pastor, wear your mask. Romans 13. That's another subject. Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities. Doesn't say obedient. It says in subjection. That's why I drive the speed limit. That's why I wear a seatbelt. That's why I wear my helmet. That's why I pay my taxes. That's why we do what we do, because we're in subjection to governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Okay, I'm with that. Thank God for good government. They overstep. They do more than they're supposed to do, but thank God for good government.
Right.
Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Here's what I wanted to get to. Therefore, it is necessary to be in subjection, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. What Paul is dealing with here is Paul's writing to people who were under Nero, who was burning Christians to light his garden. And Paul said, just be cool. Don't go out and peacefully protest. Don't go out and charge the Senate building. Don't do those things, because you're already marked. Nero wants to put you on a pole and light his garden. So Paul said, because of wrath, just chill out. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Render to all what is due them, tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, and honor to whom honor. Again, Paul is talking to a group of people who were dying. If they were found out to be a Christian, they were going to die. So Paul said, just don't raise a ruckus that's going to cause you to be killed. But don't compromise your beliefs either.
Right.
And that's kind of, I was thinking about this the other day. Do you think, was Peter committing a sin when he left the jail? He had been arrested for preaching the gospel. The Lord sent angels, broke the bonds off of him. He got up and walked. He escaped from jail. Now, nowadays, people look at him and say, Peter, you really should go back and serve your sentence.
Right.
Paul was in Damascus, and they let him down the wall in a basket to escape because the governor had said, don't you be preaching here.
Right.
Paul went in and preached. They were going to arrest him, and he got out of town. A lot of Christians today would say, Paul, you need to go back and serve your sentence
Right.
because you're not being obedient to the law of the land. John the Baptist looked at Herod Antipas and said, you're a snake. You married your sister-in-law. You know, nowadays it'd be, John, respect him. He's the ruler. You need to respect him. I get really bothered by, Daniel, the king said, don't pray. He prayed 3 times a day. The king said, don't pray. Daniel said, I'm going to pray anyway.
He did it anyway.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when you hear the trumpet, bow down. What'd they do?
They
They stood up.
Yep.
I think we have enough examples that, because here's the thing. At one time, slavery was legal.
Right.
Just saying.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody stood up and said, no, we
Right.
can't do this anymore.
Right.
So I think there is that place for us to say, hey, something's got to change.
Right.
And the church needs to do that.
Right. Yeah, and definitely that is something we need to do. And, especially when we look at Daniel, for example. Daniel did everything, well, almost everything that he was asked to do, and Daniel fit in with society well, but he knew who his first authority was, and his first authority was God.
Yeah.
And that's where we as Christians need to make sure we know who our first authority is. And at the end of the day, the easiest way to put it, and I had said something earlier, and I believe it was, do your politics trump Jesus? Do your politics trump Jesus? Okay? So if you are making choices with your politics that are not going to bring God glory, because you're not bringing, if you are choosing to abort a fetus, there's nothing different between that fetus besides size, its intellect, and a few other things that it's going to keep developing, Oh my goodness. The Lord would weep. He's not weeping because, somebody's got a poor attitude. Because we all have poor attitudes, but we can extend grace. Because there's a difference that I've always said between sinning intentionally, which permitting somebody to kill a child or to continue living, a homosexual lifestyle when they know it's wrong, and intentionally going out and sleeping around when they know that's not God's will for their life. Intentionally, you are making the choice. Intentionally, you are saying these things are okay. And God says, no, it's not. And there's no way that you can sit here and justify that. And people say, oh, well, I don't agree with all the policies. I don't agree with all of them. Well, you know what? A whole bunch of people didn't agree with all the policies of the Roman Empire. And look what happened. Look what happened. I mean, it's sickening and it's disheartening. But the biggest thing is making sure that with your vote and with your politics, that you are, and sometimes it's choosing the lesser of two evils, but that you are doing whatever you can that's going to bring the most glory to God.
And the word says that righteousness exalts a nation.
Right.
And sin is a reproach to any people.
Right.
So we're just trying to get in line so we can be blessed. I made the statement a few weeks ago to my church. I said, God is under no obligation. What obligation does a holy God have to bless America if we are going to continually sidestep his laws?
Exactly.
And we say, God bless America. You're killing 3,000 babies a day, and we want God to bless us.
Right.
We're accepting all kinds of. Well, I was watching TV the other day, and I was thinking, can anybody just be normal anymore? I mean, can a man just be a man,
right,
and a woman just be a woman?
Well, we've desecrated everything that God has created. And just think, like when we turn the TV on here in America, and I know it's not just America, but, our society has influenced so much of the world, and that's where God isn't even set apart anymore. The name God, the name Jesus is not even set apart. It's GD this or, we all say stuff, like I'll say, oh, Jesus, help me. But, that's not something 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. That would not be anything that we would even say, because his name is holy and it needs to be set apart from the rest of the world, and we, as United States, especially, or Americans, we've become so complacent with what we think of God, and we don't realize the wrath that is to come, and it's saddening. It really is.
And you were mentioning a while ago, when did all this change? I can remember a time when, and of course this goes, it almost seems archaic to even talk about things like this now, but I remember seeing the change come because when I was in school, I played football. We didn't have practice on Wednesdays because the coach knew everybody goes to church on Wednesday. You didn't dare play a football game or a baseball game or anything else on a Sunday because everybody went to church on Sunday.
Right.
I remember the first time I went fishing on Sunday. I thought I was going to hell. I thought, I've just sinned. I just caught a bass on Sunday.
You're just being like Jesus.
Yeah, because that's the way we were back then.
Go fishing for men. Yep.
And I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, when
Right.
I get out of church sometime now on Sunday, we go get on the boat and we
Right.
go and but but everybody was so careful because to be religious really meant something. And
Right.
now it's like with all the stuff that's coming at us, everything's breaking down and breaking down. But now it's gone beyond that because those things are really superficial.
Right.
Now we've got to the big stuff, and the government is assisting the big stuff.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, when the executive orders of Joe Biden, some of the first things that it involved were abortion, and I hate to keep going back to that,
Oh, we need
but
to
that's
go.
a big issue with me. Transgender, and to me, you know, people say, well, you know, you got to love them, and we do. I have homosexuals that attend my church,
Right.
and they will tell you, Pastor, don't agree with my lifestyle, but I know he loves me.
Right.
I don't leave church without him hugging me and telling me he loves me,
Right.
and they know that.
Right.
But you know, my thing is for someone to admit or to claim to be transgender is saying an infallible God made a mistake.
Right. I agree
God
with that
don't make
100%.
mistakes.
Right.
But Joe Biden signed executive
To
orders.
say 8-year-olds.
Yeah,
8-year-olds.
8-year-olds
That's sickening.
that can't even decide whether they want to wear My Little Pony underwear or Power Rangers.
Right.
But next year, they're going to know.
Right.
They're going to, you know, they'll grow out of it. And I don't mean to. Here's the thing. My issue with that is it's not those 8-year-olds, though. It's that mama.
It is.
And it's that daddy.
But it's also the government allowing
The government
that mama and
yeah.
that daddy. And that's where us, again, as Christians, when we give up our rights, our authority, because it's we the people,
Yeah.
right? We the people.
Yeah.
So when we are giving up our right to be governed the way that we choose to, because we want to bow down and we don't want to make people uncomfortable and we don't want to make them upset and we don't want them to, oh, Christians are so bad. Look, they just told me I can't be a boy and a girl at the same time. No, I'm telling you, God made a man and a woman, and if you don't like that, then that's fine. But I need to make sure that my children are protected going forward. You can go dress up as a pickle. You can dress up as a pony, whatever you want to say, but don't flaunt it in front of my kids. Don't tell me that I have to teach my kids this in school, because that is what when we don't put our voice, and I've said this before, but when we don't put our voice in the rink, when it's not in the ring, when we get sucker punched, don't sit there and complain because you just sat back and let it happen.
Exactly.
And that has happened to so many generations over and over. You see these breakdowns, and this goes back hundreds of years, but there's breakdown after breakdown, and there's these cycles because people, they forget about God. They forget about God. And I mean, I just look at churches now, you know, and I had posted something on my personal page about the American church being dead, and people are like, oh, it's not all churches, it's not all churches. And granted, no, it's not all churches. But look at how many have become comfortable with just sitting quietly in the pew. And I love expository preaching and all that, and I could listen quietly, you know, if it's a good teaching and all that. But I mean, we're not seeing these healings, and we're not seeing like actual revivals, and we're not seeing spirits be released. And there's so much darkness that is all around us. I mean, we've seen psych ward numbers go up. We've seen prescription medicine go up for mental illness. And how much of that is stuff that needs to be in the church? But the government, again, because of who we have in there and who we have in power, they're making a crap load of money from pharmaceuticals. They're making a crap load on the darkness that is running around. And let me come kind of, I'm going to circle back like Miss Paskey. Jen. So circling back, so there's a ton of darkness in the world, and especially in the government. We've seen, you know, that it is forms of idolatry, forms of child worship. It is just, it's the worst of the worst. So how can Christians expect to overcome the darkness and the satanic presence that is in our government if we don't bring the light into it? And that comes with our voice and our vote.
Exactly. Exactly.
So how do we?
And what we're going to see if we're not careful is we're going to see the pendulum is swinging to where laws are being passed. Well, executive orders are being signed,
52.
and they're not being challenged.
Right.
So if you're a Republican senator, congressman, and you ever see this, challenge it.
Yes, please.
Don't just sit back and say, oh, he's president, he can do that. No. How many of President Trump's executive orders were challenged in court
Every word
and
was challenged.
overturned?
Right.
Because there were Democrats that said, no, we're not doing this.
Right.
Somebody needs to stand up and stop this, because what's happening, they're eroding away more freedom. And what's going to end up happening is they're going to say, accept this. Oh, they're accepting it. Accept it. Oh, hey, let's see how far we
Right.
can go. Next thing you know, Pastor, you're preaching against this particular sin in your pulpit. You're out of here.
Right.
You're going to prison. You're going to be charged with a hate crime,
Right.
because we've just sat back, and the church has got to reclaim our influence. And we'll never do that by sitting back saying, well, the church shouldn't be political.
Right.
We better be, or we're going to lose precious freedoms.
I know this is like totally crazy, but I'm sitting here thinking, it's a lot of it is we have the hippie generation right now that is kind of
That's the parents.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like we're good. No, man, make love, not war. And I'm going, okay, so you're raising these kids right now. You have this lost generation with. Y'all, I think I see these kids and I'm going, how many different and I don't have any. Y'all, I got 4 different colors in my hair. I would go crazy purple if I didn't have to do the things I do. I love colorful hair. But I see these girls and they don't even look like people anymore. They're so lost. They don't even know what it is to be a person. It's like I have to look almost like a anime character or something. It's not them. And it's almost like I see, okay, you've got this hippie generation, don't fight. But then I see this generation too that is going to be the warriors. I see them rising up.
Right.
I see it in my children. I see it in my 14-year-old, almost 14-year-old. I see it in my almost 11-year-old, where they're questioning things. I don't have to say a word. I purposely do not talk politics to my kids. I don't. I want them to make up through watching their father and myself live. I want them to make the right decisions. I don't throw it at them. I say, you make your own decisions, because I don't want somebody saying, the only reason you feel that way is because mommy and daddy shoved it down your throat. No, I let them see it. And they are developing critical thinking enough that they're going, Mom. I mean, even about I had the other day, Eli was riding with me, and he looks at me when something came across about, Biden was talking about helping black business owners and Asian business owners and Hispanics. And he went, Mom, they're being so racist toward me.
Right.
And I'm going, you are 11 years old. I didn't say anything.
And he gets that.
He
Why is
got
it so
it.
hard for grown-ups to
11
get
years old. And I'm thinking, okay, and then you have them say, Mom, can they not just tell what they are? I mean, God gave us parts to know what we are. And I'm going, okay, that's the generation that's going to save America. I feel it. I see a warriors, like just these warriors coming forth in those age groups. And I know this is a conservative thing right now, but conservatives should know and be on the lookout that we have warriors rising up. Keep praying, keep the faith, because these kids, they've got common sense. This generation that is coming up that we're raising right now, they've got common sense.
Not all the time.
Not
all the time.
I mean, when they get out of their teens, we're praying.
Well, they are
But-
teenagers.
yeah, they are teenagers, so we can't give.
I'm kidding.
But they're seeing it, and they're going, whoa, y'all crazy.
Right.
And I'm believing that they're gonna start it's gonna be a revolution. There is a revolution coming, because a lot of us dropped the ball. We said, oh, this is convenient. We don't want to fight. No, just
It's passivity.
yeah.
And that's what we've been living with for the last couple of decades of passivity that
Where's
just
it
says
gotten
whatever.
us?
Exactly.
But our
It's
kids
gotten us
see it.
pushed over, and through the Obama years and the Clinton years, it's like, hey, they'll take it. They'll take it. They'll
Right.
take it. And no, in our kids, they've got to rise up and say, we're not going to take this. We're not going to take it anymore.
Right.
You know?
Well, see, but part of that we have to remember is they're seeing that because of the spirit that we have. And our faith is something that keeps us from not bowing down. And that keeps us standing tall in the fire. And that's something where your kids, I know, see that. They see their grandfather, and you may not have to say it. My kids can't help but hear me because I'm constantly going about it, which I am with everything because I'm a passionate person. But, you know, thank goodness for the role models that they do have, you know. And so that's one thing where the more and more we can bring more Christians to stand tall for God. Not just for their children, but stand tall for God. He is our first, you know, and